recording. Should we get started, or I wonder if we should wait another minute or two? What do you guys think?
I think we have a quorum here.
We do. And it looks like all the regulars, so we don't need to do any crazy introductions or anything. So I'm excited about today because Amy has volunteered to show us the Natural Solutions tool, which I think will be awesome. Just for a quick overview, so we'll spend some time looking at that tool for maybe half the meeting or so, or whatever you feel like you need, Amy. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit, as I said in my email, about florist equality assessments and kind of how we feel about either including those in the hub or not, and some discussion around that. And then I see Caroline's here, and maybe we'll take a few minutes to talk about the Growing Chicago rights of way work from the workshop that happened, and a bunch of us were there, so that's cool. And then if we have time, I can talk about another quick update on the hub. So I will turn over to you, Amy.
Sweet. Thanks for letting me do this. I'm excited because I've been giving a lot of demos of the tool, so I'm going to try and give a quick-ish demo. We'll see, but you can stop me if I'm going too much. But I'm actually more interested in a conversation maybe after, because this is the first time I'm doing it to some of you who are GIS experts, because so far I've been giving the demo to different nonprofits and things, but I think it would be really interesting to have your guys' expertise. So I think I can share my screen. We'll see. Can you guys see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Okay. I am going to do a few slides first just to give a background. I'm going to do my normal demo that I've been doing. So I give a couple slides and then I'll kind of go into the tool for the majority of it, but just a couple of slides here. Let me share my screen. So I appreciate Mark giving me the opportunity to give another demo of the tool. I know some of you were on the technical advisory team. I know Ted, Mark, and you both were, and Craig also. So this might be a little repetitive, but I think it's interesting to still see the tool. And I don't know if you guys have had a chance even to kind of dive in yourself. So I still appreciate the opportunity. So all right, the Natural Solutions tool. Let me go to the next slide. So as some of you may know, and I know Jen Jenkins isn't here, but she's a part of our Greater Chicago Watershed Alliance. And this tool really came out of that coalition. So back in 2020, Friends of the Chicago River started the Greater Chicago Watershed Alliance. It was formerly known as the Chicago Calumet River Watershed Council. So we did a little name change recently, but this was a coalition that Friends helped start in 2020, right before the pandemic. And the tool actually rose out of a mapping working group, similar exactly to this one. So in that mapping working group, we really were like, oh, we need a tool that helps us understand those multi-benefit opportunities, thinking about the Chicago area watersheds. So that's where that idea really came out of. And then on this one, I just have a little visualization, but I think I like to highlight in this that it was a pretty impressive project, because it was only 18 months from the idea to the actual tool being in our hands, which, as you all know, GIS tools take a lot of time most often, and you need to have a lot of collaboration and things. So I think this was a really great experience for me, kind of to see how the process goes of the tool idea coming into the actual product itself in the hands of people like you all. So it was pretty impressive to see. And also the willingness of some of you all who served on the technical advisory team. I think we appreciate your guys' expertise on those meetings. So I think this was a really great example of not making, the tool in a vacuum and having the different experts in the room. So then now I'll go on. I have a little timeline here, but this just gives a little bit more context of the process of the tool itself. So like I mentioned, I won't spend too long on this slide, but like I mentioned, it was the idea that was created in our Watershed Alliance. And then we had a discovery process, which was where we kind of made the boundary of the tool. We kept adding sub-watersheds as we kept meeting with people because they wanted it in their area. And then we went into the technical advisory team process, which some of you all were in, and that was really where we got all the different data sets for the tool, having a meeting based on each of the 5 objectives in the tool, which I'll show in a second. And then the technical, or TPL's technical team, they actually, this is a template that they use. So they have 14 other tools in other major cities in the US. So this is the 15th tool of their kind of template that they make for, it's called the cities, oh gosh, climate smart cities. Yes, that's what their program's called. So this is one of those tools, but of course it's a little bit different formatted in the way that we wanted it to be for the Chicago region. And then lastly, right now the tool is out, as some of you know clearly. So now we're in the outreach portion of the tool. So meeting with different groups, trying to get in the hands of everyone, because a tool is only as great as it is when people actually are using it. So I think this is why we're spending a lot of time, we're spending a lot of funding trying to do the outreach portion. And then this is my last slide I have here, but I just want to give a little brief kind of highlight of why it's unique, because again, there's so many GIS tools that are available. So what really makes this unique compared to those other tools? So on the right is the study area. And I know it's not the whole Chicago Wilderness Study area, but it does cover 4 counties, touches 4 counties, and it is about 1,300 square miles. Oh yeah, Dave, you want to pop in with a question?
Yeah, just curious.
Mhm.
What are the sub watersheds? Are these Huck 12? Are we going down even smaller, like Huck 14? What are we looking
They're
at?
Huck 12. So, well, that's the 42 number coming from. But I
Sweet.
know in the tool that I can show you in there, we have Huck 12 boundaries, and I think we also have Huck 8 boundaries. But yeah, usually Huck
Okay.
12 is what we use for watershed
Which
planning
makes
stuff.
sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, no, yeah, good question. So that's the study area on the right. And then that's kind of why, as you all know, the boundary is a little bit funky, but it's because we wanted a watershed based boundary because, you know, water doesn't follow the traditional jurisdictional boundaries. So it goes where it wants. So that's why we chose to do that. And then it also is a parcel level based analysis, which was really cool to see because a lot of tools go to the census tract level or to, you know, census block level groups. So this was really cool to see that parcel level analysis. And it's really great for planning and development purposes because a lot of that is to the parcel level. And I'll show a demo of how to get a parcel report, which is really cool. And then again, the uniqueness is the multi-benefit approach. So the squares that you see, the colorful squares, those are the 5 modeling objectives of the tool. So we have data on public health, equity, biodiversity, protected, which is hydrology data, and then connectivity. So those are the 5 objectives that we chose, kind of our watershed goals as the Greater Chicago Watershed Alliance. And then lastly, highlighting that it was a collaborative tool building process. The technical advisory team really chose the data sets for the tool, so very collaborative. And then the bottom, I won't read the stats, but 1.5 million parcels are in there, which is a lot. So it is actually the biggest tool that TPL has made. So that was pretty cool. All right, so now I'll actually go into the fun part, which is seeing the tool itself. So you guys can still see my screen okay? Right, okay, cool. So this is the landing page for the tool. So, which I can also post the link in the chat after this. I just don't think I can get in the chat right now, but this is the link, the landing page for the tool. So the first thing you'll see is the header, of course, and then you'll scroll down and you'll see these different icons. So the mapping portal, which I'll be in a second, which is really where the demo is, but this is where the tool itself lives. But then we also have a couple supplemental icons like PDF maps. These are pre-made PDF maps of each of the 5 objectives. So let's say someone doesn't want to, you know, go around in the tool and explore. They just want to see a PDF of the public health priorities. They could go, and I could go here after if anyone's interested, but that you can see it in the tool itself as well. And then we have a user guide and then the data description, which I have open, which I'm sure most of you might have questions on, the GIS experts here, but this is where all the data is coming from. So this is where, you know, you're looking at the map and there's so many, I think there's 84 data layers. So I often forget sometimes of where it's coming from. So every time I use the tool, I have this tab open and it says the name, the description, the methodology. Also, if TPL altered the data in any way, that would be here, and then the data source. And of course, this is so important because if people are using the tool and they're, you know, in a community meeting, they can have the confidence of this is where the data is coming from. So that's there for as a resource. And then
Can you
this,
post that
Mhm.
link once you get out of the full screen mode?
Yes, I will right away. I could
Thank you.
probably, I just don't think I can access the chat now with my sharing screen, but yeah, I'll post the link right after this. Because I'm curious.
'cause I
Yeah,
can
I
get-
would love for you guys to look at it. So,
Yeah, because I want to check something in there. Something caught my eye.
oh yeah, of course.
yeah.
So yeah, and then you scroll down and then you just see again the partners, and then we have links to both our website page and TPL's website page. All right, so I'll actually get into the
Oh, here it
tool
is.
now. You found, yeah, it's also a small link. You can probably just type it into. But
I
one
was
thing
looking
I
at the
will
longer
say,
one, the data description table, sorry.
oh no, you're good. You're good. Yeah, pop in with questions during it. I mean, it's an open conversation, of course. So, but I'll just say the tool itself, it's completely free, completely publicly accessible, but it is password protected. And that's mainly just because we can track the usage of who's using the tool. And also we send out a survey at the end of the year, which we're going to do in the winter to see how people are using the tool so far. And then we can also get feedback on any data layers that need to be updated or that are maybe missing. So that's why we have this login. So it's really easy to create an account. You'll just go to create a new account. You have to put in your email and then make a password, and then you get a verification code in like a few seconds. So I will log into mine. Move my Zoom bar. Okay. And then of course, the first thing you see here is the boundary of the tool, which is the subwatershed based boundary like I showed earlier. And then like you all know, there's base maps available. So of course, satellite is the best for me when zooming in and looking at parcels or different developments. And then you also have gray, hybrid, all these different base map options. And then the address bar at the top. And you guys are familiar with this, so I won't spend too much time. But again, just kind of like how most interactive maps work. And then the left side is really where all the different tool functionalities live. So I'll go through a couple of these. I don't want to spend the whole time doing these. So maybe if anyone has specific questions, we could talk about that after. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to first off, I'll show, to me, one of the really unique features of the tool, which is the parcel level report. So I'm going to type in an address, and then of course, it zooms into that address that you typed in. And then maybe I'll turn on the satellite base map. So I typed in an address in Chicago, which is 300 or 3000 South Pitney Court. And the blue dot kind of shows the area to where you zoomed into. And then what you'll see here are, if you can see the purple line polygons, those are just the parcels that are in the tool. And they are all, you're able to click pretty much every single one. And that's where you see all the data that's tagged to the parcel. So for example, this one is People's Gas. This is a privately owned parcel. It is 5.35 acres. And then you can go down and see all the administrative boundaries, the green infrastructure considerations. This is really great if you're thinking about a private developer who maybe wants to put some green infrastructure on their site. They could look at the elevation, they could look at the slope, things of that nature. And then to make a parcel report, all you do is pretty accessible. You just click this button right here, and then in about 1 to 2 minutes, it will create a PDF report, which for the sake of the demo, I have open already. So this is just what you'll get when you click that. And what you'll see, of course, is just a screenshot of the satellite-based map. And then again, you'll see the same things kind of that you just saw in the pop-up, but it's in a PDF report. So let's say you want to send this to someone, include in a grant report, that's there as an option. And then you can scroll down and then you'll see, again, the green infrastructure considerations. This is the Chicago Region Trees Initiative. That's the acronym that I get asked most often. So that's local data that we included from them. And then we have land use type, Chicago zoning if it's in Chicago, and then the overall stacked priorities. So I'll show this in a second, but this is a layer in the tool that really combines all 5 of those modeling objectives into one overall stacked analysis. So that really hits at like the areas that are prioritized for achieving those multi-benefit opportunities. So it has all 5 of those in there. But this site has the presence of the overall stacked priority. It has presence of imperiled species richness. This is a layer that we got from NatureServe. So that's really showing those at-risk areas for biodiversity. And then it has—
Amy, this is Jim Anderson. I've got a question about, you showed the CRTI layer?
Yes.
And it said very high.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, I mean, I thought we were looking at a concrete open area.
Yeah, so it means so I know this is confusing because it means very high in the sense that the ranking is very high in terms that it needs trees.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's just the opposite of what it.
Yeah.
Okay, great,
But
great.
that's we just copied how they symbolized it. So
That's all right. And I was just wondering because I didn't see any trees, so.
Yeah, yeah. No, this is a site that is very warm. Yeah, it's all concrete. So trees would be really good at this site.
Great.
Yeah, no, that's a really, I've gotten asked that before, so that's a great question. And then you scroll down, so this just goes through, I won't spend too much time, but this just goes through all the objectives. And presence means, so you'll see yes or no, and then you'll see the acres, meaning how much of it does it cover of the parcel. So this just means that it intersects the priority layer. So this has intersection of communities of color, linguistic isolation. Yeah, so that's kind of how the parcel report comes out to be. But we can talk more about this later, but I'll just move on for the demo purpose. Let me hop back to, I'll keep that open though. But hopping back to the tool, just because I went straight to the parcel report, I'm gonna flip on a couple of the analysis layers for us all to look at. And I'll go back to the gray base map. Let me zoom out a little bit. Okay. Awesome. Let me move my little screen here and close that. Okay. So the first one I'll turn on is the overall stacked priorities. So the analysis results, this was something that TPL, they do in all their tools, but the analysis results is a prioritization analysis layer. So I'll go through the overall data after this, but the overall data is really kind of supplemental data sets that are not altered at all. We kind of just put them straight into the tool for reference purposes. But this analysis results layers, these were really kind of created and symbolized by the TPL technical team. So this is thinking about those priority areas that are needed for healthy, equity, biodiverse, protected, and connected. So the overall one combines all 5 of these and all of their data sets. So that's why, of course, there's more honed in on areas, but I guess I'm just curious, and we could talk about this after, but some of the things that we noticed first looking at this was the Calumet areas really lit up, which makes a lot of sense because a lot of our partners, probably some of you on this call, are doing a lot of work in the Calumet area. I know we did an India Ridge Marsh South restoration project as a part of our alliance. So we did that kind of right over here. And then also the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal highlights when thinking about things of equity, you know, and water quality and things like that. So it's interesting to see those areas that highlight. And then of course, a lot of us know, at least in the city, the south and west sides have a lot of equity and public health priorities. So they kind of highlight as well. But the interesting thing that we noticed at Friends was that we didn't want to include a lot of river focused data because I know we wanted to keep it watershed based, but a lot of the rivers and tributaries kind of highlight, which is really interesting to think about, that if you want to improve the overall health of a watershed, you know, really honing in on the health of that stream or that tributary is really important. So it's interesting to see kind of what pulls up from the overall analysis. And then I can flip through a couple of the other ones. So for public health, this is the overall public health analysis prioritization. And this, if you look at all the layers above it, these are all getting merged into this layer right here. But you do have the option to individually look at them. So let's say you want to look at mental health priorities. That's where, and then the plus button is where you can just see the legend, but the darker the color is the higher the priority really. But you can flip through these, and these are also available if you don't want to look at the overall stacked, but you want to kind of see maybe what's highlighting some of those areas. PM 2.5 is another one. And a lot of us know, you know, the Sanitary and Ship Canal is it's a big industrial corridor. So that's kind of why that pops out. But I'll just scroll through a couple more of these. We can look at equity.
Amy, I got a question. So you said that, you know, I want to be mindful of something that we learned from the aquatics group about saying that this map will identify priorities. It probably should be thinking about potential, you know, because
opportunities.
You know, once you start zooming in and look at the opportunity, because who owns it and all that kind of stuff. I think we may want to be thinking about potential and not priority, because I get what you're doing with the map, but I just think we got to be cautious with how we talk about it, because I think, you You know, I go back to Cook County's effort with the land plan for the southeast part of the county. You know, they really reached out to the community, and I think that's something that we need to keep in mind as we think about moving forward, that we're really looking at potential and the priorities become set when we reach out to the community.
Oh, that's a really good point. I appreciate that because I think again, the language of the tool, it's hard because it's like not everything's prioritized, but that's the hard thing with any prioritization mapping, which I'm learning is that you don't want to say it's not a priority, but it's kind of just like, it's still a priority, but maybe just some of them are higher, but that's hard language to work around. So I appreciate
right.
that. But that's something that I'm practicing too, because, you don't want to say some things, of lesser value, but that was the hard thing so I'll flip through this quickly. So we do have in the data description, if you go to the analysis results tab, these percentages right here are the weights that we weighed as the technical. So this was the technical advisory team's job as well, is we sent around surveys and they weighted the different data layers that are in each of the modeling objectives. So that was also a challenge to try and weigh those, but that's kind of where we did look to some of the local data people to kind of think about how we weigh those. But that was also a challenge because how do you weight, something higher than another, but they're pretty equal. So that's kind of what we tried to do. Okay, but no, excellent question. So let me just flip through a couple more of these, but this was equity. So thinking about, and a lot of these were also from the TAT of thinking about, so I know a lot of us probably use the EJ screen, and that is an excellent resource. We have a lot of their data actually in here as well, but thinking about local equity data. So thinking about renter burden is something that a lot of people wanted to see. So we included that. Disability was another one. Unemployment was another one. So thinking about the differences, and a lot of us know this, so different, areas of the US have different priorities in terms of equity, in terms of public health. So that's why we also in health included something like PM 2.5, because that's a priority that people wanted to see.
Amy, this is Mark. Could you say what the disinvested communities data source is?
Yeah, let me flip that one on actually. So this is a data layer that came from CMAP. So this was them ranking it by, I think this is in terms of economic. Let me flip. Let's see, healthy, equity, disinvested communities. So this was a data layer that came from CMAP from 2018. So it's economically disconnected and disinvested areas. So this is right here, what we're looking at is, so it's thinking about market weakness. So it is in terms of like employment lost and low rates of small business lending and real estate value. So it is more on the economic side, but that's kind of the disinvestment.
Right, thanks.
Yeah, of course. We do have a lot of CMAP data, but that's because they're, as a lot of us know, their data hub has a lot of extensive data, and it is more local based data. So, no, great question. All right, so I'll stop flipping on. We can flip through a couple more of these if anyone's interested, but I will show a couple overlay data sets. So this is more of the supplemental data sets, which we didn't alter this data at all. So this is kind of just as is. So for example, we have tree canopy coverage, which gets really 5-meter resolution. So this is something that TPL actually had that they provided in the tool. So we can also turn off. Yeah, I think tree canopy coverage seems to be, it's also really cool because something that this tool does is you could turn on tree canopy coverage and then you could turn on public health layers and kind of see how those interact with each other. Yeah, that's something that that's something that I've been playing with a little bit. So, and then you can also.
How fine is the Trust for Public Lands park need data?
Oh yeah, let's turn this on. Let me turn this.
Like, is that parcel based? How do they?
I don't.
What's the resolution?
Yeah, let me double check in here. So that's under green infrastructure considerations.
Those are usually algorithmically defined, I think.
Yeah.
Party areas. Yeah, I don't think there's like a set boundary for that.
More than a 10-minute
walk.
So must be from the census block.
Yeah, it probably is from census because it is like looking at the shapes itself. It doesn't look like parcels to me.
No.
But this is, this is something that TPL includes in all their tools because their mission statement, some of you might know, is like they want everyone to be within 10 minutes of a park, which we also agree with because public access is important. So,
right. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. So we can flip through a couple of these. We also have I'll turn on the watershed boundary with David you asked about. So there's Huck 12 and then we also have Huck 8, which we know. Huck 12 is, in terms of watershed planning, I know Huck 12 is just the most used one. So that's the one that we included, but I'm curious, I would love for you guys to dig into the tool and let me know any layers that you think would be helpful for the tool if you have time to do that.
That might be a question for Jim. Would Huck 10 be useful or no?
Mhm.
You know, most things are based on Huck 12.
Mhm.
You
Well,
know,
it is.
yeah, everything, you know, I'm going back to, you know, C2000 and ecosystem partnerships. Those were all based on Huck 12, but you know, I'd have to, you know, and that's what the US EPA Healthy Watershed
Mhm.
index is based on also. So,
Oh, neat. I didn't know that.
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah, that cafe was great. I was like taking out the notes of all the layers going.
Yeah.
The analysis from the Protecting Healthy Waters
that
group.
tool is great. I love it.
Yeah, I actually just found out about that months ago. So I was like, oh, we might need to include a couple more layers from that. Yeah, let me turn this off and then I'll flip through maybe, let's see. We have PM 2.5 again. So something that I like to do is compare the analysis results with the overlay data. So that way you can kind of see how TPL might have symbolized it. So look, this is looking at PM 2.5 concentrations. This is by census tract. And then we also can see, let's turn on, oh, one thing let me turn on. We do have CW data that Mark provided, I think in the TAT. So let's look at that. So we have biodiversity data. And I know we have some GIV data, but this layer I'll turn on because I think this is fascinating. So this is again from NatureServe, but this is their imperiled species richness rank. So 10 is where kind of the most at risk for biodiversity loss, thinking about extinction. But we might want to turn, so what I also do sometimes is you can turn off the parks layer if you want to see kind of, there we go. But it's interesting. I mean, of course, they kind of intersect with a lot of the bigger natural areas in the region. So, but this is a layer that we found kind of last minute that we included, which is pretty interesting. But then I
Glad you
also can,
did.
yeah, this is, I will say NatureServe has a lot of great JS data. I think you do have to pay for it, but it's something that we just found that we really like their data. So,
Yeah, Mark, I would say that because nobody has FQI data across the region uniform, this might be the answer to that question.
let's turn on this. Here we go. But then, so this is taking some of the core habitat that we took from the CW hub. And then we also have some of the corridor data, wetland corridors, prairie and grass. But again, I liked that they didn't clip this, of course, to the watershed boundary, because this is nice to see because, you know, they intersect with the boundary and they flow out. So I really liked that the TPL technical team didn't clip that. And then one layer that I'm excited to show, which is one of our layers at Friends that we put in here, which is from our HCAP. So this is thinking about wildlife connectivity corridor opportunities. So this is something that we made thinking about connecting different habitat hubs, which I talked about a little bit in the Growing Chicago meeting. Some of you were there. But yeah, so this is the layer that we got to put in there.
Could I see
Okay.
the woodland
Mhm.
forest cover there real quick?
Yeah, this one right here. Yeah, so this one kind of, there's a little bit down here, which makes sense. It overlaps a little bit with the Palos and Sag Valley area.
So Amy, did you at all by chance work with the Oak Ecosystem Recovery folks?
I don't think so.
Because they did
Ecosystem.
a corridor mapping for oak ecosystems.
Okay, that's interesting to know.
So that might be, I think it would add a lot of value,
Yeah,
especially in the area that is Blink, which is inside
yeah.
your boundary. Because
Mhm.
I do think, I'm trying to think of her name.
Lindsay Darling.
Yeah,
Oh,
Lindsay
from
Darling.
Lindsay's awesome.
the Chicago Region Trees Initiative? Or does
Yep.
she? Okay, yeah, I have her. That would be something to have for the update. So they're the Oak Ecosystems Recovery Group.
Yeah, there's a
Okay.
recovery plan
Okay,
and
recovery
what
plan.
we did,
Okay.
what we did, so the one drawback is it stops at the state boundaries, but we did look at historical oak lands, and then
Mhm.
Lindsay did a effort to connect the corridors And so,
Okay.
so I think that's might be an important layer for you, especially in your boundaries, because I think it's gonna show more than what you're
Mhm.
getting right now.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that because I think that's the thing. This is the first version of it, so I think it's
Right,
finding
right.
what we don't have. Yeah, so I appreciate
Great.
that.
Thanks for clicking on that.
Yeah.
Amy, can you talk just a little bit
Mhm.
more about that connectivity layer that you do have? Is it like green trails, or like, I'm trying to remember how this was developed.
Yeah, so I know this was, so yeah, this was part of our habitat connectivity action plan, the HCAP. But so what we did is, and I know my predecessor did this, but so we had 30-acre, so it was habitat hubs that were 30 acres or greater. And that was really thinking about how to connect those. And I think this was looking at greenways and was looking at different, and I could send you the documentation because I don't have it right now on my screen, but I know it was connecting those larger habitat hubs, but I don't remember. It might have been off-street trails, but I'll have to look at the documentation again. But that might be available. Maybe I can drop the link in the chat to the HCAP, but that might be on actually our website page. But yeah, that was something that we made. And I know we're thinking about updating that soon because that was made about a year and a half ago. So because we did make that layer, that's something that we might update for the next version of the tool. I don't know if that
Great, thank
answered
you.
your question. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Okay. And I know I'm probably almost out of time, but I'll show one other feature that's pretty cool that I really like. Okay. So the query data function is something that's pretty cool because let's say you don't have an area that you can just search to or an address. This is where you would really put in the criteria that you're looking for a project or for advocacy effort or whatever that may be. So you can really put in the different fields and then find those parcels of interest. So I'll do an
Nice.
example. Yeah, this is really cool. I really like this one. So I'm going to do an example query of parcels in Summit. So like most of you might be familiar with this, you can just click your query value, add condition, and then I'm going to go to public health stacked priorities. And then I'm also, I'll run this first. So as you might know, sometimes queries generate a lot of parcels, but so that's why you might have to keep adding things to, refine your query. But so yeah, right now we have 2,874, which might be a little bit too much if you're thinking about an area to focus in on. But the cool thing with this is you can export this table as a CSV file. So you could kind of
Nice.
make pivot tables, play around in Excel and things of that nature. But for the purposes of this, I kind of want it a little bit more refined. So I'm going to add vacant land. So we're going to be looking for parcels in Summit that have the presence of the public health stacked priority and have vacant land. So, and this
Somebody
goes
earned their paycheck designing this.
yeah, this was, something that's been around at for a really long time. So they kind of have been using this. 14 other cities, they have this tool. So this is a little bit of a smaller analysis. So 77 parcels, that's a little bit more manageable. But for example, I'll zoom into this parcel, which is actually a parcel that we at Friends have been looking at. Let me turn on the satellite base map. But this is located on this Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal, and it has the presence of public health priorities. It's vacant land, and it also has, I think, some biodiversity priorities. Yeah, it has all the biodiversity stacked priorities. So this is just an example of, let's say you find a parcel for a future project or something, but the query function is really powerful because you could really put in all of those analysis layers. So it's not the overlay layers, but most of the overlay layers are in the analysis layer. So there was a lot of different options that I encourage you all to look at within this. So, okay, I think if I have time, I'll do one other quick thing. I appreciate the time to show this because I know.
Oh, it's really neat.
Yeah, and then lastly, one other thing I will show is the 10-minute walk report. So let's say you have a project that you already made or a project that you're thinking about, or this is a really great example for an advocacy effort. So I don't know if some of you might be familiar with the Damon Silos development. It was more of a Chicago-based news story that was in the Sun-Times and everything, but a lot of nonprofits like Friends got together and wrote an advocacy letter on the Damon Silos parcel, which is right next to Bubbly Creek, which is right here. But this was being bought by Matt Asphalt, and we saw it as a very important river edge opportunity because thinking about the uniqueness of the parcel and things like that. And it's right next to Canal Origins River Walk and Canal Origins Park and Eleanor Park Boathouse. So we really wanted to do some advocacy around this. So we did a 10-minute walk report. So to do that, you click the 10-minute walk impact report, and then you draw a little polygon, which is pretty quick. You can just click there. It's going to be really rough polygon, but there we go. And then you double click it, and then you can name it David Silos, save, and then you can tap to run the analysis. So this is an analysis. Again, TPL's thing is they want everyone from a 10-minute walk from a park. This doesn't have to be a park, but it could be any sort of project, but this is just the language that's used. But the cool thing is it's intersected with the transportation network. So it's not just buffering, you know, and you're jumping over buildings, but it's actually walkable. So you can click OK, and I won't actually do this because I already did it earlier. So that will save us a second
What's
here.
even the algorithm to make that work? Very neat.
Yeah, it's very
don't know
impressive.
how-
So
Yeah.
then what you'll get is another PDF, which is 2 pages. And so the image right here, the map on the bottom right corner. So it shows the polygon that you drew, the access points, and then the red is the red polygon is the service area, which will I'll show you in the second page. That really shows the demographics of who is within a 10-minute walk of this polygon. So as you scroll down, the second page shows the total population, the households, the age, the income, and the race and ethnicity. So thinking about advocacy, we could say points like there's 66% Hispanic population that are within a 10-minute walk that will be affected by this. They are 51% low income. So it's really powerful to have this, you know, in terms of advocacy and things like that. So that's one other feature that I wanted to show. But I think for the purposes of the demo, I can stop now because I think I spent a little bit too much time talking about that. But I appreciate the time to do this. So
We appreciate
Amy, when you
taking
start to
time.
get a bunch of data layers mapped out, is there a way to
mhm.
switch what's overlaid on what?
So one thing you can do is move. So sometimes when you open the tool, it's interesting. Sometimes the overlay data will be first. And sometimes the analysis data
Oh.
will be first.
Huh.
So these three lines you can do move up or down.
Okay, great.
And then, yeah, that will, and you can also change the transparency. So let's say you want it a little bit lighter to see something else.
Nice.
But these, yeah, I forget, this is a little hidden thing I always forget about. So this also takes you to the metadata, takes you to the data description as well. That's another way to get there. So
just an aside, when you're talking to folks,
mhm.
protected lands looks kind of out of date. I think it's PATUS with some of my stuff thrown in. And also it doesn't include any of the privately protected stuff, like Nature Conservancy's Ginsburg Prairies, the Indian Boundary Prairies aren't in there at all. So with the public stuff, it looks out of date and there is no private stuff. And I can work with you on that. It's just an FYI.
Yeah.
And it's not a criticism. It's just like my eye went directly to that because that's my one skill set, knowing where
Yeah.
protected stuff is.
No, I would appreciate, I mean, you could follow up with me over email and send me that. That would be really helpful. I know one of our layers, I think the zoning layer needs to be updated. And it was hard because I know CMAP just released their new land use data layer, like right after we launched this. So
Of course.
yeah, sometimes the updated data is something that we need, but that's something that we want to get fixed for the winter update. So I would appreciate if you have time to send me some of that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I'll stop. But I'm happy to chat more about it if anyone's interested. I think you all have my email, but I can also put it in the chat.
It's great work. Great work.
It really is.
It is great work, and a lot of the data comes from CMAP. So I know the answer to my question before I even ask it, but I'll just ask it for purposes of conversation. You know, like what would it take to extend this to the boundaries of Chicago wilderness? And would that be useful? You know, is it even worth having that conversation? So, you know, there've been a couple the way that GIV 2.0 kind of grew spatially over time, once the basic template was laid out, There's a mad scramble for data, of course, and a lot of these things might just not be doable. But I'm curious what folks think about that.
I think it's very easy to do. It's just gonna take someone putting the money up to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm encouraging people to talk to Mark, and we connected Cindy Rundell with McHenry County. I'm trying to get in with the sewer pack in Wisconsin, and we could do the same thing with NERC in Wisconsin. I think it's just a matter of coming up with the project and maybe having a little bit of time for this group to maybe look at it and get in and play around with it. Is there anything that we're not seeing that's not there that should be there? Or that, what are some really great tools that, we haven't, because this really ties in a lot of what was missing in, Chicago Wilderness GIV, is to start getting into the equity and where do we need to be putting things. And so I think it picks up on that need greatly, and then sharing it with the GIS folks at CMAP, NERC, and SewerPack, and see what they think. And maybe maybe the three of those agencies could pull together to fund, because that's who funded the first GIV.
Mm-hmm.
No reason to think that a tool like this. I mean, Amy, I'm just gonna say again, this is great work, and I can just see how someone could get lost in here asking a question, and they're going to find an answer to the question that they weren't even asking. And that's the great thing about a tool like this. It's you can put things together.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's exciting. I know we'll talk a little bit about the Growing Chicago initiative, but it's exciting because they used a couple of our layers, right? So I think it's cool. Yeah, it's cool. That was really exciting for us to see. And that's what we hope for it too, for the tool, is whether or not people start using our layers in their analysis and building off of them is something that is also just an opportunity that we like to see. So.
Yeah, I know for the biodiversity layers, a lot of that's based, as in the data dictionary you have here, off the GIV, the Green Infrastructure Vision. So that is the whole CW region. It is a little bit dated too. And I think that's to Dave's point, when seeing that those protected lands aren't showing up in some places, that, so sort of figuring out a way to do kind of a hybrid between the two might be helpful, to have that more updated protected lands, but it's not broken out sort of in the way that the GIV was, by like all the different types of cores that are out there, the core habitat areas. But yeah, it was fun, with the Growing Chicago, Growing Chicago GROW rights of way areas, looking at how we can prioritize sort of segments of rights of way areas. So we kind of took all the rights of ways across the whole region and dissected it into little 1 mile segments, and then looked at those segments, how they sort of intersect with these same data layers, distance to those protected areas. But anyway, I'm getting off topic from where we were. But yeah, I think, so the CMAP stuff, I guess, is what we'd have to look at and see, like, because CMAP obviously is only the 7 counties. So how we get kind of beyond the boundary of that is the challenge. So some of that, I think, like the flooding data and stuff, I think they said would be really tough to update to like get beyond the 7 counties. I don't recall a whole lot beyond that though.
Well, the State Water Survey or the Office of Water Resources with IDNR might be able to assist us with that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's floodplain data, right? And that, I don't know if that would.
That's state data, really.
Yeah, the floodplain could certainly go beyond the boundaries of the 7 counties. So I don't know, we'd have to dig into the nitty gritty and see what we could expand and not.
Craig might know this, but Amy, have you presented to any partners outside of the CMAP area, like in NERC?
I don't think we were trying to get in touch with the South Suburban Mayor's Caucus to do one outside, like in the South Suburb. But again, it's just trying to, I know a lot of people are at capacity right now. So we've been doing a few
Sure.
outreaches and then kind of waiting for follow-up, but
And,
mhm.
and another person who springs to mind is Victoria Wittig, who's on the steering committee of Chicago Wilderness and is also the coordinator of the Northwest Indiana Urban Waters Partnership. And I mean, I think there's elements of, and there's been a whole conservation action planning strategy in Northwest Indiana that would be, I would love to see how those parts come together, how folks are starting to work through that process to begin to get to prioritization and then to link that to this tool. I think could be really some powerful examples for other parts of the region.
Mhm.
I think at the steering committee would be a really great place to present this. The
Mhm.
Chicago Wilderness Steering Committee, and then Laura put in the chat, or someone put in the chat. Yeah, Laura that's there. Doing a cafe.
Mhm.
Cafe would be a really great idea, and we, you know, make sure we reach out to the right people and make sure that they're there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would love to do a cafe. I know I've been meaning to, maybe June or July, because I know we were doing a lot. I think a day in June I could do, but I know we were doing a lot of outreach, but I don't want to forget about the cafe. So I would still like to do that. Yeah, that would be a good group too, because I know the cafes get a lot of different audiences. So I'd be interested to hear what people say.
Yeah,
So
and the point that Jim, we can, if we do schedule it, then we can do some personal invites once it's scheduled to get
Yeah.
folks like Victoria and steering committee members and others there to be a part of that.
I see we're down to like our last 10 minutes here, so I want to move on to a couple other topics. One that I wanted to talk about is about the florist equality data. So I've been getting some emails, and Laura, you kind of set up this connection with Will Overbeck, I think is his name.
Yep.
I don't know if other folks are familiar with him. He worked for Hay, I think he currently works for Hay and Associates.
We started, yes, with Applied Ecological Services first, and then has transitioned to Stantec and Raz. I think now he's with Hay and Associates.
Mhm. And I think he's done, from his email, I think he's done a lot of these florist equality assessments for different organizations like what we were just listing. He was kind of excited, I think, about some of the work we're doing with Hub and like with our tracking work in the, so you guys have seen many times the goal tracking that we're doing for Healthy Lands, where we're taking kind of all the information about where restoration work has been done that we can gather up. So like places that have had prescription burns and where invasive species have been removed, all that kind of stuff. And then we've layered on top of that, like where we're seeing eBird observations of critical bird species. So another layer that we've talked about in the past putting in there is this florist equality assessment, but we don't really have a data set that covers the region. So I'm not sure if it's in hearing us talk about it, maybe at Wild Things or somewhere, but I think Will got turned on to some of that, the idea of that work, and wanted to see if we could begin to gather together all this florist equality data and information. I've done a little bit of reaching out, like at the Growing Chicago workshop, I was chatting with, I think it's Kim at Cook County Forest Preserve District, who's their GIS person there. And she said that it would be a struggle to get that from Cook County, because they said that basically would indicate where there's really high quality areas in addition to the mediocre places, but that high quality, they worry about poaching. And so they probably wouldn't want that to be public facing if we had that. Was chatting with Mark about this meeting and setting up an agenda, and we were talking about this florist equality idea, and he came up with the idea, well, maybe we put something in there that's more qualitative that the public can see, but we hide the resolution of the actual numbers, you know, either behind, we could have like an interactive map per se that's restricted to only certain folks, but the public would then see only the sort of high, medium, low. So I'll stop there for a little discussion, but what do you guys think about trying, because I guess the idea would be like, how can we see the health of these lands, not just whether they're being managed or not?
I'm going to say the way that I would try to get around Cook County's concern is that many of these sites that have high FQIs are already identified as Illinois Natural Area Inventories or nature preserves. But much like what Amy did with her data, you know, you didn't really see a specific number anywhere. You saw a range of numbers. So we could take, you know, FQIs from 1 to 10, 10 to 20, or 1 to 20, 20 to 40, and you know, and put those together in you know, the thing that I'm going to say that is most important is if you look at Palos Hills and you don't look at let's say the management units at Palos Hills, you look at the overall FQI of all of Palos Hills, and that's what gets the number. It kind of makes it more difficult to say, you know, I think the sensitivity of the data is a concern, but I think we need to mask it. But the only way to really identify quality across the region is most likely by that FQI, or, you know, the other thing that you can use is endangered and threatened species, but nobody really wants to let those go out either. But then, like Mark, you and I were talking about the Chicago Wilderness Priority Species. And so we have a bunch of wildlife species that we have 12 that could be used as markers. And we also have several plant species that were identified, and we just haven't picked up on those yet. And so those could also be a surrogate for the FQI. If folks are unwilling to share that data, which I don't think they should be if we're masking it, I think it's a good layer to have, but it's all going to depend upon the agencies bringing up that data.
Yeah, so I think Will would ideally like to see it as at the management level, at the management unit level, not at the entire site level.
I just don't think
that is stand up to.
Yeah, I don't think the agencies are going to give you that.
Okay.
Ted has a question.
Yeah, this sort of reminds me of this discussion, everybody, with sort of and I'm not recalling the name, but it's the high quality lands that are under threat that no one wants to know where they are, right? It's sort of that private list that we want to know where it is. And so I wonder if this conversation doesn't dovetail with that. And I like Jim's idea about, you know, sort of giving it a number, but not anything else. That might be a way to solve it, but I also wonder if this isn't another way to talk about it, because we do have that ongoing discussion with those unique sites that sort of people want to keep under wraps because of sensitivity reasons, right?
Yeah, good points, and good point, Casey, too, in the chat, another way to think about it. And I think they all kind of get us to, and for a bigger conversation, maybe some other day, of like, what would be the goal of this? And I think we just saw from Amy's presentation that there's a whole bunch of parcel specific planning opportunities that come to your mind when you and that for which this tool is really useful. On the other hand, when you zoom way back out, you could see the tool being useful for overall assessment type of thing, or broader metric for the region kind of a thing. And so I think we probably really want to know why we want to know it. I mean, we all feel comfortable having the data, but like, what would be the purpose to which we would put it? and maybe we need to have that conversation, and maybe with the Healthy Lands group or something, but or we could do it here. Give ourselves more time to kind of lay out the use case, and then we know how much to mask it and all of that, and how hard to press to get the data.
I think that's an excellent point, and I will remind everybody that we are currently hosting where those INAI sites are that are not protected. So it's I brought this up with the Friends of the Nature Preserve folks, and they're surprised that they haven't forced us to take those data down yet. But we do have some sensitive data already up on there, and they allowed me to do it. When I asked them for the data, I told them I was going to put it publicly, and they said it was okay. So anyway, that's an interesting thing right there. But I think
Well, just keep in mind that happened. You asked them pre-Belleville Prairie, and it was
That's
after
true.
Belleville Prairie. They wanted everything taken down. They just forgot, I think, that they gave it to you.
That's interesting.
I'd
But
like,
I think what Mark is saying is really totally valid, that like we got to think about how we want to use it, and if we need those values for certain people, let's put it behind sort of the firewall version where people can log into it. But yeah, the public just needs to know, yeah, that site's pretty decent, that one's pretty mediocre, and that one's, you know, just getting started. I think that's probably the level that we need. But go ahead.
and I think Mark Bowman made a really good idea and that would be to have the hub group meet with the Healthy Landscapes group to have this discussion, because I think, you know, I think we got to get from, you know, the land managers, whether or not they're going to share, you know, uniquely sensitive data, or how would they represent it on the map if you know, they wanted to. And I think it goes back to, why do we want to show it? You know, what questions are we going to ask, and how are we going to use it? And I know you know, there's a good question there, and I know we have that question, but I think that might be a really good idea to have a joint meeting with them and have this discussion, because, you know, they're all mapping these things right now. I know for a fact. Lake County's got MECO, which is, you know, like leaps and bounds, you know, jumps beyond what when I first started. And Wayne Lampa created these ecosystem databases that was all shared through Chicago Wilderness Funding. That's where everybody's been using. And so, you know, I think everybody has that data, and, you know, I just don't understand how we can't bring it together. And we may want to bring in the Prairie Research Institute and the Natural History Survey, and how they gather data and how they keep data. That might be another interesting partner to, you know, Patty and I had several discussions with them about ecological. They're interested in ecological data. They're not interested in about management data. So
we are at time. I did want to say one other quick thing about kind of how the hub's getting used currently, or plans for it, and that is with what I was alluding to earlier about the Friends of the Illinois Nature Preserve. I met with them a couple times. Dave Holman, you're a part of that group as well. So one of the things that we've talked about is they would like to start going out and looking for the next Belleville Prairie, by reviewing all of those sort of slivers and chunks of areas of INAI sites that appear to be unprotected. And so I was helping them to do that, or was agreeing to help with that by creating what we've already had in the past. We have sort of a behind a secure site, a way of going in and marking parcels and putting notes in there, sort of conservation manager notes. And so I was going to adapt that for that team to use it for that purpose. And so basically what they would do is go in and at an aerial imagery view, desktop view, zoom into these sites and evaluate, does it look like something we should visit on the ground? Yes or no? Make a note of that, and then go through, after they go through all of those, start to actually do the field work of visiting some of those sites or working with people to do that.
yeah, I looked at Lake County again, and a lot of those unprotected INA sites are, you know, in Lake County, they're lakes. And so
Yeah.
that's a significant amount of acreage that's being added up, but, you know, to be honest with you, that was identified as an important area, but, you know, whether or not it could be protected is a good question that maybe the Friends of the Nature Preserve could answer, you know, because I know like Cedar Lake is completely privately held around the lake, and so IDNR owns a little portion on the west side, but most of the lake is privately held and kind of protected now. So I think that kind of someone doing that research would be very, very helpful.
Mhm. I think, and the focus was probably going to first be on those ones that are mostly land that's unprotected, but as you point out, most of it is water and buffered water areas and rivers. Does anyone see any problem with doing that? Okay, good.
Nope.
Oh, Casey, you get your hand up.
So first thing I'd have to say is, can you hear me? So I always seem to have
Yes.
problems here. Okay, very good. So I put in that idea about using mean C instead of FQI, because I think mean C actually has can be portrayed better than FQI and kind of hide some of those sensitive issues that would be of concern. But I think the other thing that could be done is in terms of trending. So if you have differences in FQI or differences in mean C, that actually might be what you might want to portray. So basically,
Can you remind us, because I have it up here, but the difference between mean C and floristic quality index, like what
well,
is
floristic quality index is when they do an inventory of all the plant species within a site.
Yeah.
And it's put into a formula, and it basically has a direct relationship to the diversity of a site.
Mhm.
Whereas mean C basically through another formula looks at that habitat's resiliency. So its ability to respond to disturbances based on all of the species that are in there. So in that way, it's more equivalent to the health of an ecosystem.
Yeah, FQI is built on top of mean C. And you total up all the C values and you.
Yeah, they're related, definitely.
Yeah, they're definitely related. So realistically,
Henry,
in my mind, the mean C is going to give the same information.
I'm not sure what's going on with dinner tonight, so I think to be safe, we should get it here on the way home. I
Ted,
have
we're-
food, but
Ted, we're
to my
hearing you.
knowledge, no one's gonna be home to cook it, so.
That,
And I
that
don't
we're
wanna make
coming
you wait
over.
until 9 o'clock for me
Yeah.
to cook, or 9:30. So think about what you.
there we go.
Sorry.
We're going to
couldn't
Ted's
get
for
that.
dinner.
Oh, were you? I guess Laura was able to mute him. That's good. Okay. That didn't occur to me. We were just gonna sit and listen to the whole conversation.
Yeah, so
We're all hungry.
a primer on FQI and mean C and how the indices are derived in the first place would probably be helpful as we continue to ponder this.
Yeah, and you'll probably get some people saying that the species richness is a more reflective indicator of quality, and that was what Marlon Bowles was working on. Again, I think not everybody's running species richness compared to FQI, because Jerry Wilhelm created the FQI process, and
Mhm.
so but anybody that's collecting data can run species richness, but it's just it goes back to who's going to have this data, and then is NatureServe a good I would challenge someone to look at that data and say, is it wrong? Is it it's like the US EPA Healthy Water Index. There's some things that aren't quite right in that index, but for the general part, if the streams in your area, they are rated in the correct order and probably in the correct proportion. And so if that is something that's already there, why go out and collect all this information? And some agencies are just not going to give that data out. And so you know, that might be a way around. a
And
work-
some of the fact that it's gridded like that is its own kind of mask as well.
Right, right.
Yeah, I was thinking that when we were looking at their data, that it's like kind of different because it's in blocks kind of instead of.
Yeah. Huh.
You're saying it gives it some anonymity.
Right.
more so on the exact location of where those sites are.
This is, I gotta go myself here, but, Mark and everybody, it feels like this is a rich conversation that we should maybe, give ourselves the time to work through, next time. And we also, missed Carolyn's report.
We did, yeah.
So I know we can. Feels like those are good things to talk about next time, and I just think. And Mark, if you could, would be helpful to show again the 5 things that you've got going into that basic index on that one. Was it goal? Is it the
Goal
first
tracking
page?
for healthy lands, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then I think we have access to the tool from Friends of the River, which is awesome.
Mhm.
And NatureServe is right there in the tool. We should all go play with it. I'm gonna, I know what I'm gonna be doing.
If everyone's in agreement, I can show a hanger of FQI work we do here.
Oh, cool.
Right. Okay, I gotta go.
Yeah,
Right.
that's great. That, I'm
Yes.
interested.
I'll
right.
stick with it.
Thanks, Amy.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for letting me hijack the meeting. Sorry.
So can you see my screen?
I
Yeah.
can.
Okay, so these are all of our units here at Argonne, and so I'm gonna do this really quick so we can do a swipe tool here. And this is 2007 FQI of the whole site, and this is 2023.
Wow.
So that's pretty impressive. It basically shows that with any type of ecosystem input, whether it's controlled burns, mechanical clearing, you're going to get a positive response. And then real quick here, can't see that now because of the,
That's neat.
because I have that.
Yeah,
Is that-
and again, like, we're not seeing any specific values, so like this kind of thing
Right.
might even be possible, I don't know what people are not comfortable with, but
And so watch this. This is every year over time for 11 years. So we would inventory 1/3 of the site every year for the last 10 years. And so every year there's a change in the chloroplasm map.
This is really inspiring, Casey.
Well, what I'm not showing you is the attribute table. It has a lot of numbers. in
Right.
it.
But as you said, people, or as Mark commented, people don't necessarily need to see that.
So what and this type of mapping can be exported, and it doesn't give you any of the finer details. Some of the stuff sharing, and that's a hanger for the next time we want to talk about it.
is
I've
that,
never seen that.
are those data, that you would be able to share just for your particular?
We would share because we have a security fence and guards around Argonne National.
Yeah, they can shoot people who come onto their property.
No. They don't have guns, but they do have ATVs and various ways of patrolling the site. And since we've been clearing the site substantially, they can see very well into some of these remote areas. But
Got it.
we have had poaching just
Really?
from our own people here, and it's not a nice thing. But in
What
my
do they
opinion,
Taking
with
plant or
poaching,
animal.
no, not animal. It was a Trillium flexipes, declined Trillium. It was an important particular specimen. It was part of a restoration project.
Mm.
So it happens. But, our response to that, aside from anger, is to, make sure that our restoration activity can kind of overcome that type of phenomenon.
Casey, if you're okay sharing it, I think it would be a great data set for us to practice with, for like Don and I, as we start to think about how to do some of the symbolization without showing it to the public.
Sure. Let's talk about that later.
Okay,
Well,
cool.
And also, this is Ted. One last comment. That is a great map to show private land holders, and that's a big group in the green infrastructure, right? Target group in the green infrastructure layer or goal team. So that's a really interesting way to show that. And I think that's useful for a lot of conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is just an
Great.
FQI map. We have the data, but we haven't put this in a mean C. We also have number of native species. We also have number of invasives. So the thing about this that I think is more important that I hadn't realized for a long time is a lot of agencies don't have the type of funding to get these types of inventories a frequency that I've been able to do. But I've spent probably about 10 to 20% of my budget on analysis simply because I need that analysis to justify the funding.
Okay.
So there's that.
Yeah, I really wonder to what extent all the different forest preserve districts have these data or don't. I don't even know if they're collecting it or not. I asked.
I wish
one of-
Jim was still here.
Yeah, that's true. Jim would know.
Yeah, and I wish it would, I know that Will's work schedule doesn't really allow him a lot of meeting time, but it would be valuable to have him
Yeah.
answer some of these questions directly as well.
Yeah, I wonder if he could join one of these meetings or if he's too busy for that. Did you already ask him about that, Laura?
Early on I did, but maybe actually mark a direct invitation now that you're very much in a specific, it was more of a general, how can I contribute? So the truth is this is much more specific, and I think maybe it's worth a second ask.
Okay. All right, well, we should probably end things here. We're 15 minutes over already, but I really appreciate